There is a word in the Calabrian dialect that has no translation in English. Picciotto. Technically, it means little boy. But inside the Ndrangheta, the oldest, wealthiest, most feared criminal organization on earth, it means something closer to the one who has earned the right to bleed. Not the right to kill, the right to bleed. There is a difference. The Ndrangheta understands that difference better than any organization in human history. They have been operating since before the American Civil War. They survived 2 world wars, fascism, the collapse of the Italian state, and 15 major prosecutions. They control, by some estimates, 80% of the cocaine that enters Europe. They earn $60 billion a year. They have never, not once in 150 years, produced a top-level informant. Not one. Because this is not a gang, it is not a cartel, it is a family. Blood bound to blood, generation after generation, in a tradition so old it predates the Italian language itself. Mara Serrano knew all of this. She knew it because her father had told her, in a voice just above a whisper, the night before he was killed. "Figlia mia," he had said, "my daughter." The Ndrangheta does not forgive. It does not negotiate. It does not forget. He paused. Neither do we. As always, let me know where in the world you're listening from. Subscribe for more stories. The cafe on Mulberry Street was called Sole e Ombra, Sun and Shadow. It had been there for 31 years, longer than most of the buildings around it, longer than most of the men who came to drink their espresso at the Zinc Bar every morning at 7 a.m. before the city woke up. It was not the kind of place that advertised. It had no Instagram page, no Google listing, no Yelp reviews. If you didn't know it existed, you weren't meant to. Mara had worked there for 2 years. She arrived at 6:15 every morning, unlocked the side door with a key she kept on a worn leather cord around her wrist, and began the ritual, grinding the beans, a blend of Arabica from Calabria's own small coastal growers, which arrived in unmarked sacks every 6 weeks, pulling the shots, warming the cups. By the time the first men arrived, she had already been there an hour. By the time they left, she would have heard things that, in a courtroom, were worth millions of dollars. She never wrote anything down. She didn't need to. Mara Serrano was 26 years old, with the kind of face that people looked at and immediately forgot. Not plain, but assembled in a way that the eye slid off. Medium height, medium build, dark hair pulled into a low, practical knot. She wore no jewelry. She asked no questions. She remembered everything. The men who came to Sole e Ombra every morning were, on paper, real estate developers, construction contractors, import-export businessmen with deep ties to the port of Gioia Tauro in Calabria, which happened to be one of the largest container ports in the Mediterranean and one of the worst-kept secrets in international law enforcement, where they were Ndranghetisti, men of the Ndrangheta, and not the low-ranking ones, not the Picciotti, the foot soldiers, the young men with expensive tattoos and cheap tempers. These were men of the Società Maggiore, the major society, the inner circle that made decisions affecting half the cocaine in Europe, the labor contracts on 3 major New York construction projects, and the quiet financial infrastructure that held all of it together. Mara knew their ranks. She knew their family trees, their feuds, their loyalties. She knew who was afraid of whom and why. What she had not known, walking to work that Tuesday morning in November, was that today was the day everything would change. The first sign was the black SUV. There were always cars on Mulberry Street, delivery trucks, taxis, and the occasional limousine ferrying some Wall Street executive to a breakfast that cost more than a week's rent. But this SUV was parked directly across from Sole e Ombra at 5:58 a.m., its engine running, its windows tinted to the legal limit. 2 men inside, both facing the cafe entrance. Mara walked past it without breaking stride. She logged the license plate in her memory, a rental, she would confirm later, from a company in Queens with no traceable history, and went in through the side door. Inside, she put on her apron. She ground the beans. She pulled the first shot. Her hands were perfectly steady. This was the thing about Mara that no one who looked at her would have guessed. She had been trained from the age of 9 to be still. Not calm. Stillness and calm are different things. Calm is the absence of fear. Stillness is fear made invisible. Her father, Ernesto Serrano, had understood that distinction. He had taught her the difference with the same careful patience that he taught her to identify the origin of an espresso bean by its smell, the age of a wine by the color at its rim, the rank of an Ndrangheta member by the way he held a coffee cup. Ernesto Serrano had been the finest intelligence analyst the Italian anti-mafia directorate had ever employed. He had also been a dead man for the past 4 years. The regular men arrived at 7, as always. Enzo Macheda came first, capo locale, head of the New York locale, a title that sounded bureaucratic until you understood that a locale was a perfect copy of a Calabrian clan transplanted to foreign soil, and that its capo exercised authority over every Ndrangheta-affiliated operation from Red Hook to the Bronx. Enzo was 63, with the face of a retired schoolteacher and the hands of a man who had once, in his 20s, worked on the fishing boats out of Bagnara, Calabria. He drank his espresso standing up. He never sat down in the cafe. This was not comfort. This was strategy. A standing man can exit faster than a sitting one. Then came Taddeo Scarpone, Mastro di Giornata, the one who passed the news, the internal communications officer of the locale. Taddeo was 40, handsome in the specific way of southern Italian men who had spent their whole lives being told they were handsome, which is to say, it had made him careless. He always sat at the corner table, and he would tap his fingers on the zinc when he was thinking. Mara had noted that his left index finger bore a callus exactly where a pen would rest. He was the one who wrote things down, which meant he was the one who would eventually, if the right pressure were applied in the right place, become the most dangerous man in the room. The third man was new. He arrived at 7:14, 14 minutes late, which itself was a statement, and he did not order coffee. He stood in the doorway for 3 seconds, long enough to read the room, and then he moved to Enzo Macheda and said something in a voice so low that even Mara, standing 4 feet away with her back turned, could not hear the words. But she heard the texture of it, the dialect, not standard Italian, not even the rough Calabrian Calabrese that the other men used among themselves when they thought no one was listening. This was something older, something from the mountains, the variant of the southern dialect that preserved Greek substratum words, Ndranghetiari, Vangelista, words that carried the weight of the 19th century, of the original rituals, of the founding of the organization itself. Mara's father had once described it as the difference between speaking and invoking. She did not turn around, but she memorized his voice, its cadence, the particular way he dropped the ends of words, which placed him not just as Calabrian, but as coming from somewhere specific, the province of Reggio Calabria, probably, the deep south, San Luca or its surroundings, and the mountain town that was widely known as the spiritual heart of the entire organization. She memorized the sound of his shoes on the tile floor, medium weight, leather sole, not dress shoes, something more practical. The sound of a man who was used to walking on unpredictable surfaces. She memorized his height from his shadow against the wall, 6 feet, perhaps slightly over. And then she heard Enzo Macheda say, very quietly in the mountain dialect, Il giovane Taviani, the young Taviani. Mara did not know the name. She searched her memory, 4 years of files, of her father's research, of her own painstaking reconstruction of the New York locale structure, and found nothing. A new name, an unknown man, from San Luca or its surrounds, carrying old authority in his voice. This was the most dangerous thing she had encountered in 2 years. She poured Taddeo Scarpone's espresso. She set it on the zinc. She did not look at the door. The young Taviani left at 7:22. 8 minutes. He had said what he came to say, and he had gone. Mara began cleaning the portafilter. She would need to find out who he was before he found out who she was. She estimated, perhaps 48 hours. The apartment in Astoria was a second-floor walk-up, with one window facing an air shaft, and walls thin enough that Mara could hear her neighbor's television through the plaster. She had lived there for 2 years. The lease was in a name that did not belong to her. The furniture was from a thrift shop on Steinway Street. She owned no artwork, no photographs, no objects that connected her to anything prior to the moment she had walked into New York as a person who had not previously existed. This was intentional. She sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold and opened her laptop, encrypted, purchased for cash, replaced every 14 months, and began building what she privately called a scaffolding. The technique came from her father. When you encounter an unknown, you do not search for it directly. You search for everything around it, and you let the shape of the absence tell you what the unknown must be. Taviani was a family name from San Luca. She knew that much. San Luca was, and she was careful, here, to keep her thinking precise. Not just a geographical location. It was a symbolic one. The sanctuary of the Holy Mary of Polsi, outside San Luca, was where the Ndrangheta held its most important annual meetings. Bosses from Australia, Canada, Germany, the Americas, they all came every September to report to the Crimine, the governing body, at that mountain sanctuary. San Luca was to the Ndrangheta what Rome was to the Catholic Church, the source of legitimacy. A Taviani from San Luca was not a minor figure sent to New York for administrative reasons. She drank the cold tea and thought. The Ndrangheta's New York operations, as she understood them, as her father had reconstructed them across 20 years of fieldwork, were primarily financial. The port of Gioia Tauro handled a significant percentage of container traffic through the Mediterranean. Ndrangheta-connected officials at that port had, over decades, developed the ability to guarantee the unimpeded passage of containers. This made the organization invaluable to every major drug trafficking network with European ambitions. The New York locale managed the American end. Money laundering through the construction sector. Relationships with the surviving remnants of the traditional Italian-American families. The Gambinos, the Bonanos, who provided street infrastructure in exchange for favorable wholesale prices on product. It was, in its way, elegant. The Ndrangheta did not commit retail crimes in New York. They committed wholesale ones. So why send someone from the mountain? There was only one answer that made sense. Something in the New York operation had changed. Either an opportunity had arisen that required direct supervision from Calabria, or a problem had arisen that required direct correction. Problems, in this context, had a specific meaning. She found the thread at 2 in the morning, not through a database, she was too careful for that, but through a series of public records. A building permit filed in Brooklyn 6 weeks ago, a construction company registered in Delaware with a registered agent address that was, if you cross-referenced it with a separate set of permits filed in the Bronx, connected to a shell company that appeared in a 2019 financial intelligence report she had obtained through channels she would not describe, which was connected to a family name from Locri, Calabria, adjacent to San Luca. The Brooklyn building permit was for a project on the waterfront. Red Hook, a residential conversion, officially. 42 units. Red Hook waterfront, container access. The permit had been filed under a new LLC. The principals of that LLC traced through public filings in 3 states, led eventually, not directly, never directly, to a holding company registered in Luxembourg, which appeared in a single footnote in a 2022 DEA report as a suspected money laundering vehicle for a Calabrian criminal family whose name was redacted. But the LLC in Brooklyn had a managing member, a real person, required by New York law to appear on record. The managing member was listed as Marco Taviani, age 31. Address, Naples, Italy. She stared at the name for a long time. Marco Taviani. The young Taviani, 31 years old, from the heartland of the organization, now managing member of a Shell LLC attached to a Red Hook waterfront project. This was not a visit. This was an installation. He had come to New York to stay. She closed the laptop. She sat in the dark kitchen for a while, listening to her neighbor's television, a laugh track, distant and absurd, and thought about her father. The Ndrangheta does not forget, he had told her. Neither do we. She had believed him then. She had spent 4 years living as if she believed him. Training, watching, learning, waiting. She was beginning to understand, and for the first time, what she had been waiting for. The next morning, he came to the cafe. She knew it was him before she turned around. The weight of the footstep, the leather sole on tile, the particular quality of the silence that entered the room with him. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, the way a room changes when a person with genuine authority walks into it. He ordered a coffee in standard Italian. Not the dialect, not yet. She made it. She set it on the zinc without looking at him. "This isn't how you make it in Calabria," he said. His Italian was precise and slightly formal, the Italian of someone who learned to read before he learned to speak it, which was unusual, and which told her something about his education. The accent placed him from the south, yes, but educated, not rough. "The extraction time," she said without turning around. "You pull a Calabrian espresso slightly longer. The roast profile is different. The beans they use up near the Aspromonte are grown at higher altitude. More density. They need more contact time with the water." A silence. "You know Calabrian coffee," he said. "I know coffee," she said. She heard him pick up the cup, set it down after a moment. "It's good," he said. There was something in his voice she couldn't immediately identify. Surprise, yes. But more than that, the particular attention of someone who has spent his life in an environment where things are rarely what they appear to be, and has just encountered something that is exactly what it appears to be. "Who taught you?" "My father," she said. She heard the pause before he spoke again. "What was his name?" "He's gone," she said. "Died 4 years ago." She turned around then, for the first time. She needed to see his face. Marco Taviani was 31 years old, and he looked like a man who had been made by a landscape. Olive dark skin from years of sun, sharp dark eyes that held the kind of stillness that is not calm, but its disciplined cousin. He was not conventionally handsome in the way of men who know they are handsome. He was something more specific and more unsettling. He had the face of someone who had never needed charm because he had always had something more durable than charm. He was looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. And it sounded in a way that made her careful, as if he meant it. "Thank you," she said. She turned back to the bar. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mara," she said. Mara," he repeated, testing the word. "Just Mara?" "Everyone here goes by just one name," she said. "It keeps things simple." She heard something that might, in another context, have been the beginning of a laugh. "Fair enough," he said. He left 10 minutes later. He had not sat down. He had not spoken to Enzo Macheda or Taddeo Scarpone. He had come and drunk his coffee and left. Mara wiped down the zinc bar. In her memory, she catalogued everything she had just observed. His Italian, His hands, the way he held the cup, right-handed, thumb and first two fingers only. The grip of someone who drank espresso as a discipline rather than a pleasure. The crease on the inside of his right wrist, barely visible above his cuff, not a scar, a burn mark, old, 10 years or more, and the kind that comes from being very close to something very hot, very briefly. She thought about what kind of young man might have been close enough to fire to get a burn like that on his wrist. She thought about the Ndrangheta's initiation ritual, the new member's blood falling on the image of a saint. A burning image. She filed this information in the place where she kept things that were not yet useful. He came back the next morning, and the morning after that. On the fifth morning, he said, "The blend is different today." It was. She had adjusted the ratio. Slightly more of the Calabrian beans, slightly less of the Ethiopian. A 2% change. A change that someone who drank coffee as a discipline might notice. Someone who would not notice was someone who drank it for comfort. She turned around. "You have a good palate," she said. "My grandmother," he said. She had a farm outside Lockery, small, 12 trees. She treated those trees like children. He looked at the cup. She said coffee was honest. It couldn't pretend to be something it wasn't. "Your grandmother was right," Mara said. He looked at her, and for a moment, one moment, specific and unrepeatable, she had the sensation of being seen, actually seen, in a way she had not permitted herself to be seen in 4 years. Not her cover, not Mara the barista. Whatever it was that lived beneath those things. She looked away first. "Same time tomorrow?" she said. "Same time tomorrow," he said. On the 7th morning, she made a decision. It was the hardest decision she had made since arriving in New York, and she made it while standing at the coffee grinder at 5:59 a.m., watching the dawn come pale and cold through the one window of Sole e Ombra that faced east. She had learned everything she could from a distance. The Red Hook project was accelerating. The permits had moved through their approval process with a speed that suggested the appropriate officials had been appropriately assisted. The shell company structure was expanding. 2 new LLCs filed in the past week, both with managing members whose names she did not recognize, which meant they were new to New York, which meant this was larger than she had initially understood. Something was being built here, not 42 residential units. Something else, hidden inside the residential conversion, the way a real message is hidden inside an innocuous letter. Her father had called this technique a doppia lettura, the double reading. To understand the real meaning, you had to be close enough to see the second layer. Marco Taviani was the key to the second layer, and the only way to reach him was to let him reach her. This was, she understood perfectly, the most dangerous thing she had ever contemplated. She ground the beans. She pulled the first shot. She turned around when she heard the door open. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. And she said, "I think you should sit down today. I'm going to make you something different." A pause. "Different," he said. "There's a preparation," she said, "that my father learned from an old man in Bagnara, Calabria. You add a piece of dried bergamot peel to the portafilter before you pull the shot. A very small piece. And it doesn't taste like bergamot. It just makes the espresso." "More itself," Marco said quietly. She looked at him. "Yes," she said, "more itself." He sat down. He told her his name on the 9th morning. Not his last name, she already knew that, but his name as a gesture, a small offering, the way you might open a door a few inches to see who is on the other side. "Marco," he said. "I know," she said. And then, because she had calculated exactly how much honesty was safe, she added, "Enzo mentioned you." He went still. "Enzo talks too much," he said. His voice had not changed temperature, but his hands had changed. The right thumb had moved to the inside of his wrist, a gesture she had not seen before. Self-touch. specifically to the burn mark. He mentioned your name. Nothing else, she said. Enzo talks a great deal about nothing, which is its own form of discipline. Marco looked at her with the expression she was beginning to recognize as his version of a smile. Not the mouth, but the eyes. A slight narrowing, a slight deepening of the lines at the corners. You are very observant, he said. It's a quality required in this work, she said. Barista work, he said, and there was something in the word, not mockery, but a kind of careful testing. The same way you test ice before you step on it. Any work where the quality of attention determines the outcome, she said. He drank his coffee. He set the cup down. My father, he said, had a phrase for people like you. Quelli che vedono attraverso. The ones who see through. Through what? She said. Through whatever people put in front of them, he said. The performance, the presentation. He looked at her steadily. It's a rare quality, and in my experience, it comes from one of two things. Either a person is born with it, or something happened to teach it to them. Maybe both, she said. Maybe both, he agreed. The cafe was empty. Enzo had left 10 minutes ago. Taddeo was late. They were alone for the first time in a room that had always before been populated with the presence of other men, other ears, other calculations. Tell me about your father, Marco said. It was not a question. It was an invitation. And it was, she understood, also a test. She had prepared for this moment. She had a story, she had a history, constructed with care and cross-referenced against what she knew of the region, the period, the kind of family her cover required. A father who had worked the groves south of Reggio Calabria, a mother who had died young, an emigration story entirely believable, statistically common. She did not use it. Instead, as she said, he was a man who knew that the most dangerous thing in the world was not violence. It was information. A long silence. What happened to him? Marco said. He was right about the information, she said, and it caught up to him. She watched Marco's face move through something she could not fully read. Not surprise exactly, but a kind of recognition, as if her answer had confirmed something he had been quietly wondering about. I'm sorry, he said again. You keep apologizing for things that weren't your fault, she said. How do you know they weren't? He said. It was the most honest thing he had said to her in 9 days of mornings. She felt its weight. I don't, she said. Not yet. The Red Hook project broke open on a Wednesday. She learned about it the way she learned about most things. Through careful assembly of public information that became, in the right sequence, non-public. A noise complaint filed with the Department of Buildings. A second complaint, same address, 24 hours later. A third, this time from a building adjacent to the project site. A warehouse, still operational, that handled refrigerated food imports from Europe. The warehouse. She pulled its import records from a trade database and spent 2 hours cross-referencing container manifests. The warehouse received regular shipments from a logistics company based in Antwerp, Belgium. The Antwerp company had appeared twice in European press coverage of Ndrangheta operations in the Netherlands. Nothing conclusive, nothing prosecutorial, but present. And the Red Hook project was not 42 residential units. It was a receiving facility. Warehousing attached to a residential conversion as cover. The containers would come in through the adjacent warehouse, the contents would move through the connecting sub-basement that the building permits obliquely referenced as utility corridor access. And from there, she stopped herself. She was reasoning past her evidence. That was her father's cardinal sin, the mistake he had warned her about, with the particular urgency of someone who had made it himself. The evidence leads where it leads, he had told her, not where you need it to go. She set the laptop aside. She looked out the window at the air shaft. She thought about Marco Taviani's burn-marked wrist, about coffee and bergamot peel, about the way he said quelli vedono attraverso, the ones who see through, with a tone that held both warning and something else, something she was not permitted to name. She thought about what her father had died for. She thought about what she was here to do. She picked up her phone and did something she had not done since arriving in New York. She made a call. The contact was a woman named Claire, who was not her real name, who worked for an agency that Mara did not identify aloud on the phone, ever. They met at a coffee shop in Flushing, far from Little Italy, far from Astoria. Public and anonymous. Claire was 50, with grey-streaked hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She ordered green tea and did not touch it. "You've been dark for 2 months," Claire said. "I had nothing," Mara said. "Now I have something." "How certain?" "The structure is there. Red Hook, the warehouse adjacency, the Antwerp connection. I can map it. I just need confirmation of what moves through it." "And your access point?" Claire said. The phrasing was careful. Claire was always careful. "Close," Mara said. "How close is close?" Mara looked at her tea. "He's begun to trust me." Claire was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mara, how much of this is professional and how much is—" "Professional," Mara said. Her voice came out a fraction sharper than she intended. Claire looked at her over the reading glasses. "Because you know what happens when the personal and the professional get tangled," Claire said. "You've known it since before you started this work." "I know," Mara said. "Your father—" "I know," Mara said again. Quieter. A silence. Rain had begun outside the window, streaking the glass in long, irregular lines. "I need 3 more weeks," Mara said. 3 weeks, Claire repeated. "Then I can give you everything." Claire looked at her for a long time. Then she picked up her green tea, which was cold, and drank it anyway. 3 weeks, she said. "And Mara—" "I know," Mara said. On for the 3rd time. She did know. She knew it perfectly. It was the thing she was working hardest not to think about. On the 12th morning, Mara arrived at Sole e Ombra and found Marco already there. Not inside. Outside. He was standing across the street, holding a paper cup of what appeared to be terrible coffee from the deli on the corner, looking at the cafe with an expression she had not seen on his face before. She stopped. He turned. He had heard her footsteps. He was someone who heard footsteps. They stood looking at each other across the rain-wet street. "You're early," she said. "I was thinking," he said. "About?" He looked down at the paper cup in his hand. "About the difference between what something is and what it looks like." She waited. "This cafe," he said, gesturing with the cup. 31 years. No sign. No advertising. Only certain people know it exists." He looked at her. "And yet you work here. A woman from—" He paused, catching himself. "From wherever you're from. How does someone like you end up in a place like this?" "The same way anyone ends up anywhere," she said. "Necessity." "Necessity," he repeated. He looked at the cup again, then dropped it into the trash can beside him with a single precise movement. "Bad coffee is a form of disrespect. You should know that." "I do know that," she said. "Then let me ask you this." He looked at her directly. The morning light was flat and grey, and in it she could see something she had not seen clearly before. That he was tired. Not sleepy tired. The deeper kind. The kind that comes from a long time of being careful. "Why don't you ever ask me anything about myself?" She considered the question. "Because," she said, "you'd tell me what you wanted me to know. Not what I actually wanted to know." A long pause. The rain had stopped. Water dripped from the awning above the cafe door. "What do you actually want to know?" he said. "Whether you're here because you want to be," she said, "or because you were sent." The silence that followed was the longest of their 12 mornings together. Then he said, "Both and neither." He walked toward her and stopped when he was close enough that she could see the burn mark at his wrist, above his cuff. "Open the cafe," he said. "I want the coffee with the bergamot." She unlocked the door. On the 15th morning, Enzo Macheda did not arrive at 7. He did not arrive at 7:15. He did not arrive at all. Taddeo Scarponi came in at 7:22, and his hands, when he set them on the zinc bar, were not perfectly steady. His left index finger, the one with the pen callus, was tapping, but not the rhythm of thought, the rhythm of fear. Mara poured his espresso. She set it in front of him. She waited. "Enzo is in the hospital," Taddeo said, in the low, flat voice of someone reporting a fact they are still trying to believe. "I'm sorry to hear that," Mara said. "A stroke," Taddeo said. It was possible. Enzo was 63 and ran on espresso and the chronic stress of a man responsible for a criminal empire in a city that had recently increased its Italian organized crime task force by 30%. And it was possible. It was also possible that in the Ndrangheta, as her father had explained it, leadership transitions were rarely natural events. "Will he recover?" she asked. "Unclear," Taddeo said. He drank his espresso in one movement. He stood up. "Taddeo," she said. He stopped. "Who takes over?" she said. He looked at her with the expression of a man who is hearing something he should not be hearing from someone who should not be asking. Then he left. Marco arrived at 7:45. He did not order coffee. He stood in the doorway and looked at her and said, "You've heard." "Some," she said. "Some is enough," he said. "For today we close." "The cafe doesn't close," she said. He looked at her steadily. "It does today." She held his look. In her chest, something was performing a complex calculation. The mission on one side, the instinct on the other, and in the middle the 12-day wait of mornings and bergamot coffee, and the truth he had almost told her across a rain-wet street. She reached under the bar. She turned the sign. Chiuso. Closed. He told her the truth in pieces, the way you take apart something complicated, not by force, but by finding the right sequence, the right pressure point, and letting the thing open itself. Enzo had not had a stroke. He was in the hospital, yes. But the cause was not cardiac. Enzo had, 3 days ago, made a decision about the Red Hook project that the people he reported to in Calabria, the crimini, the governing body, had not authorized. He had made a deal, not with a rival family, with the DEA. Mara kept her face still. "How do you know?" she said. "Because they sent me to find out," Marco said. "That is why I'm here. Not the project, not the construction, to find out how far the rot had gone." He looked at her, and then to stop it. "Stop it," she said. "The Ndrangheta has 42 known informants in 150 years of history," Marco said. 42. In every other major organization, Cosa Nostra, the Camorra, the cartels, the state has produced informants by the thousand. "You know why we have 42? "Family," she said. He looked at her with something sharp and assessing. "Yes," he said, "family. When the only people who can testify against you are people whose children's futures depend on your silence, the silence tends to hold." He paused. "But Enzo doesn't have children." That was always the risk with Enzo. "So what happens now?" she said. "Now," Marco said, "the locale stabilizes. Operations continue. The Red Hook project—" He stopped. She waited. "You know about Red Hook," he said. It was not a question. The calculation again, the mission, the instinct, the 12 mornings. "I know it's not 42 residential units," she said. A very long silence. "Who are you?" Marco Taviani said. His voice had gone quiet in a way that was not soft. The quiet of someone who has just understood that the room they are in is different from the room they thought they were in. She looked at him, and she thought, the evidence leads where it leads. "My father's name," she said, "was Ernesto Serrano." She watched his face. The name registered. She could see it. Not a flinch, something more internal. A reordering. He knew the name. Of course he knew the name. Ernesto Serrano had spent 20 years building cases against the Ndrangheta, and the Ndrangheta had spent the last 4 years knowing that his daughter had disappeared after his death. "You're Serrano's daughter," he said. "Yes," she said. "You've been here for 2 years," he said. "Yes." "Listening," he said. "Yes." He stood very still. She had a momentary awareness of the distance between them. 5 feet. The zinc bar between them, and what 5 feet meant to a man who had grown up in a world where the appropriate response to what she had just told him was swift and non-negotiable. "And the agency you report to," he said. "I haven't said I report to anyone," she said. "No," he said. "You've been very careful not to." He looked at her. "But your father didn't work alone, and neither, I think, do you." The rain had started again outside. She could hear it on the awning. "Marco," she said. "Don't," he said. "I need you to hear something," she said. "I said don't." Enzo was going to give them the container schedule, she said, the Antwerp manifests, the sub-basement access codes, all of it. And he was going to give them names. Not just New York names, Calabrian names. The real structure. The crimine. You understand what that means? He was very still. "How do you know this?" he said. "Because I've been in the same room with him every morning for 2 years, she said. And Enzo, unlike you, was not careful about who he didn't talk to." The silence stretched between them. "If that information reaches the people it's going to," she said, "it won't just be Enzo in a hospital. It will be, you know what it will be." "What do you want?" he said. His voice had a quality she hadn't heard in it before. Not anger, something more complicated than anger. "I want what my father wanted," she said, "the full structure, the crimine. Documented, prosecutable." She looked at him steadily. "And I want you to help me get it." The longest silence yet. She waited. The rain came down outside. Marco Taviani looked at her across the zinc bar of a café called Sole e Ombra, sun and shadow, in a city neither of them had been born in, with 12 mornings of bergamot coffee and careful truth between them and every reason in the world to be on opposite sides of an impossible line. He looked at her for a long time. "My grandmother," he said finally, "had a saying, 'A chi non ha niente da perdere è il più libero di tutti.' The one who has nothing to lose is the most free of all," she translated. "Yes," he said. She waited. "What would you lose?" he said. "If this doesn't work?" "Everything," she said. "Same as you." Another silence. Then, "The bergamot," he said. "The old man in Bagnara, Calabria, who taught your father. What was his name?" She frowned. "Why?" "Because if you tell me his name," Marco said, "and it's the right name, then I know you are exactly who you say you are. And not someone the other side sent to find out how deep my loyalty goes." She understood. A test. And a specific one. A real name. From a real place. From her real father's real life that no one could invent or research. She said the name. Marco closed his eyes. Just for a moment. Then he opened them. "He was my grandmother's cousin," Marco said quietly. "He died in 2019. He was 91 years old, and he complained until the end that no one in the family could make espresso properly." The zinc bar was between them. He looked at her, she looked at him. "Tell me what you need," Marco Taviani said. 3 weeks later. The indictment was unsealed on a Thursday morning out of the Eastern District of New York. 26 defendants, the full structure of the New York locale, 3 Calabrian nationals named in absentia, their connection to the crimine documented for the first time in a prosecutable American filing. Mara read about it on her phone, in a different city, in an apartment whose address she had not given to anyone except Claire. The cafe on Mulberry Street was dark. The sign still read Chiuso. She set her phone face down on the table. She thought about her father, about what he had built and what it had cost him, about the 20 years of patience and precision and the morning they had come for him 4 years ago while she was 3 states away, and the call she had received at 7 a.m. From a number she didn't recognize, a voice she also didn't recognize saying simply, "It's done." She thought about a burned wrist and bergamot peel and the specific quality of a silence that is not calm, but its disciplined cousin. Her phone buzzed. A message, no name attached, an unregistered number. My grandmother's farm had 12 trees. She said the 12th one never gave as much fruit as the others. She kept it anyway. She said some things are worth keeping even when they cost more than they give. I still have the farm. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up the phone and wrote back, for the first time in 3 weeks. Your grandmother sounds like she knew what she was talking about. She set the phone down. Outside the window, the light was doing the thing it does in certain cities in November, coming in low and gold, making ordinary streets look briefly like something worth painting. She looked at it for a while. Then she got up. She put on her coat. She went to find a cafe that could make a proper espresso. It wasn't the same as making it yourself, but it was a start.